Alright guys, what's going on? This is Otis here. And today's commentary is about my setup number one in the helicopter, what I suggest the pilot and the gunner using. And then pretty much it's just communication like after that, like how the pilot and the gunner always just need to communicate, and then just tips on how to be like a better gunner and a better pilot. Because the number one question I've been getting lately is, what's your setup? What do you use? What do you recommend? So I'm going to go over that first. In this gameplay, Swamp Fox and I, we had about a little over 40 kills in between us when about 12 minutes of flying, and I cut it down to about a little over 8.5 minutes of the flying time. And pretty much the setup that I recommend using pretty much exclusively for the attack helicopter when you're the pilot is Laser Painter. And the reason why I would recommend using that once you get that unlocked is because if you're going against the other helicopter, that gives you another added guided missile that you're able to use to attack the other helicopter with if your gunner has the guided missile equipped, because sometimes they don't have it unlocked yet. Sometimes they have the TV missile, and it's definitely something I would highly recommend using if you are the gunner, because what's going to happen is once the pilot attacks the helicopter and they use their countermeasures, now they're going to be open to another attack right away. And so if you're close enough and that laser painter's on them, your gunners will be able to switch over, lock on with the guided missile, and hit them and kill them pretty much 9 out of 10 times once they've already used their countermeasures, and they won't have enough time to reload. And it's just it's just a good survival technique too, because your biggest threat in the helicopter is another helicopter. Then after the helicopter, it's the plane, and then ground units. So it's always your number one focus when you're in the helicopter is to take out the other helicopter, because if you don't, they're gonna turn around and kill you, and it's just not gonna be fun. And the next setup too, or the next, it would be the countermeasures for the pilot. And you could either use flares, which you get automatically now, or you can use the ECM jammer once you get it unlocked. And I would definitely highly recommend using the ECM jammer for a multitude of reasons. And number one is it'll break the lock of Soul Flams or the tank's third seat, because you need to break that right away, as soon as possible, because someone's using a javelin and you're locked onto that, and they fire it. 9 out of 10 times you are going to die, just because the ECM and the flares are broken with javelins, and so if they're using it, it's still going to kill you whether you flare or ECM after that, which is kind of unfortunate. Usually the only kind of way around that is if you flare and you get really close to the ground for a javelin, because what ends up happening is it ends up circling around you a few times, and then it'll actually end up hitting the ground and exploding, and so that kind of saves you there. And, that's just something you definitely have to watch out for. There's times now where I won't even get in the helicopter if the other team's heavily using Soul Flam and Javelin, just because, you'll get up there, you'll get one kill, and then that's it. You go and you end up dying, which is kind of unfortunate, taking the fun out of it. Hopefully they end up fixing that in the next patch, just because it's definitely something that needs to be, looked at and fixed. I think they've said, yeah, we kind of know it's broken and stuff. And for ECM Jammer, I would highly recommend that, because it breaks the locks also. And then also for when you're going against either a helicopter or an airplane, pretty much once you use that ECM jammer, if they just fired a missile within a few seconds, pretty much like 7 or 8 out of 10 times, those missiles will end up missing you after you've deployed your chaff cloud. And so there's that, once you deploy your ECM jammer, they're not able to lock onto you also, and it breaks the lock. And if any missiles have been fired within 1 or 2 seconds after you use it, it's going to miss you most of the time. It's still going to hit you here and there. It's still not 100%. The ECM jammer for the helicopters and airplanes is broken to a certain extent, and it's kind of unfortunate. Hopefully they get it fixed a little bit better here and there. And then of course you're going to have the anti-air missiles for the attack helicopter, just because for the pilot, because you can't replace it with anything else, so you have to have that. Yeah, I guess you could maybe take it off, but no one's going to do that. And I'm going to talk about gunner too, mostly now, because that's what the gameplay is the gunner. And the first thing that you could use for the gunner, the first two things that I would recommend either using is the autoloader. Stealth, kind of like here and there, I would maybe suggest if you're really starting to get locked on to ground units, because that maybe will give you that extra little 2 seconds of flight time where you'll be able to use your countermeasure and fly away if there's another guy trying to lock onto you. But I would suggest autoloader, and that's just due to the fact that if you do have that on, you were able to get a lot more rounds on tanks, because the guided missile will disable them if you hit them on a good spot and they don't have any reactive armor or anything. And if you hit them with most of that 30 rounds that you have in your cannon, you will end up destroying them. And what usually will happen is you'll have a guy or two running out, and it takes about, I think it's a little over a second to fully reload your cannon once you're empty and once you reload. And so, that's that added extra, second or 2 seconds that you have to shoot that guy instead of having him run into a building and hiding, and, hoping he doesn't have a rocket launcher or a Stigla or Igla, to lock onto you and take you down, because they do disable you in one hit. And so that's a definite priority too. And another tip too, I have to say, with the gunner is, all you have to do is you only have to worry about your right joystick if you're on the consoles and stuff. And so what you're able to do is, that left hand is only used for flares. And so what you need to do is you need to press that select button and just spot and spot and spot and spot and spot and spot. Like, that's what I'm doing the whole entire game, is just spotting with that left hand. And it's going to help you out. You're going to be able to, things will pop up on the screen. You'll be able to see where guys are. It doesn't work all the time, but I would say most of the time it works. It seems like Battlefield, it's like things mostly work, but not all the time they work. So it's kind of funny and interesting how that works. But it's it's all right. And the last thing I have to say is communication between your pilot and your gunner, because it's such a key to surviving and living. What's going to happen is, when you're getting targeted either by a helicopter or ground units, you're going to need to have the pilot use their ECM or flares first. And if you're only listening to the sound, you got to be really careful to the sound, because you'll have that like solid tone, and then once the missile's actually fired, you'll have the beep 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 beep. It's a little bit quicker, a little bit more higher pitched, and that's when you need a flare if you have them. And if you have ECM, it's pretty much too late if you're the pilot, at least. And so that's the reason why we were able to survive so long too, is because he would use his ECM jammer. I was listening to the sound, and after he used his ECM jammer, he would tell me to flare. And usually I didn't flare this game until he said flare, and it helps you a lot more, because you'll live a lot longer. Because once you use the ECM jammer, you have 3 to 4 seconds of where no one can lock onto you or shoot any missiles. And then after that, it's 6 seconds of no one can fire anything at you. And then you'll have 6 seconds where everyone can lock on and fire. And so if you time it absolutely perfectly, you could have 12 seconds to where no one can lock onto you or shoot you with anything if you timed everything correctly, because the ECM is 6 seconds and the flares is like 4 or 5 seconds. And so the pilot's ECM and flares recharge in 12 seconds, and a gunner's flares recharge in 20 seconds. So you do have to be a little bit careful with that. I know a lot of times if you're not communicating, the gunner and the pilot will both use their flares at the same time, and that's just completely useless. And I used to use thermal, but I've definitely I have stopped using thermal, just because you survive a lot longer using flares as a gunner. And so that's another thing too that I that I've started to do pretty much all the time now. And it'll enable you to get a lot more kills, survive a lot more longer. You won't get as many kills using not using thermal, but you will still get a significant amount of kills. And this was just a good shot that we had towards the end here, where the tank ended up killing us. He hit us with an unguided shell from like their spawn or something. It's kind of unfortunate, but it happens. There's some good tank shots and good tank people out there. Like people have seen some of my videos where you go and you're like across the map and you fling it and you end up hitting the helicopter in like one shot, and you're just like, I just can't believe I did that. But hopefully this helps you guys out with tips being a pilot and gunner. And thanks for watching, guys.